Hello again, I'm Diego Martinez, and you're listening to CHOONS, a podcast about the songs we vibe to. This is the show where we discuss underrated music anthems, the creative process behind them, and their undying legacy, all with a commentary from the people who made them, our tune architects. In this episode, we're joined by three very special guests: singer and songwriter Regina Richards, Grammy award-winning musician and producer Stephen Bray, and lyric writer Mary Kessler. They're here to share their memories of their 1986 top 10 pop hit, Baby Love.
Stephen called me and said, "Hey, I've got this song. I want you to work on it." Out of that came the demo, which of course, because Stephen did it, it sounded like a record because he's so incredibly talented. So that made people say, well, who's singing this?
It's a cute song in that it's super simple and innocent. I also think the lyric is, thanks to Mary, it's very straightforward and believable. Like the situation is one that most people, if they're lucky, have found themselves in.
When I saw people enjoying it so much, when I saw the girls at the laundromat knowing every lyric of it, you know what I mean, at the end of my street, I was like, oh, I get it. This is what you're meant to do, give pleasure to people and have fun.
When you think of global stars known on a first-name basis, you think of all the greats: Cher, Janet, Aretha, Madonna, Prince, Celine, Mariah, and Whitney. Even most recent icons like Rihanna, Shakira, and Adele fall into that mix. These are unique and highly talented individuals that embody a style all on their own. They've dazzled us throughout the years with their performances, and with all aspects of their art, they bring us closer to them. We feel like we actually know them because of the impact they've had on our individual selves, hence just calling them by their first names. At times, our affair with them is taken one step further by dishing on their personal lives as if they were our friends or family members. More than anything, we feel like they're really part of us, part of the soundtrack to our lives. Regina Richards might not be as widely known as all the names I mentioned earlier, but her contributions to the world of pop and dance music award her the distinction of being known by her first name, simply Regina. A veteran of the late 70s and early 80s rock scene in New York, Regina switched gears to songwriting and publishing when she caught lightning in a bottle with a perky and playful song she co-authored. Regina was not necessarily seeking stardom, yet with Baby Love, she managed to achieve just that, sharing the charts with fellow artists whose rise she witnessed during her time in the industry. As it often is with our tune architects, her story begins in a household filled constantly with music. The youngest of 6 girls, Regina taught herself to play the guitar and write songs when she was just a kid, with the help of the sounds that surrounded her home in New York City, including standards from the 50s, Motown, the Ronettes, and a certain foursome from Liverpool, England.
I was told by another one of my sisters, you play pretty well for a little kid. Why don't you start writing your own songs? And I went, oh, I never thought of that. I just really like playing what I hear on the radio, like all the hits that I loved. That's where I was coming from with that. But when I started writing, it was like the Beatles, verse, chorus. Oh, and then, George does his lead. I got to put a little music release in there. And then, you repeat stuff at the end. So I'm a self-taught songwriter, but having them as a guide was like totally incredible. And I also love the Stones and tons of other people. But yeah, they were my songwriting influence. In the very beginning, it was more to me like poetry. I did write a lot of poetry when I was young, like in grade school. I saw that as poems that I tried to put music to. But the first song that I think I totally completed, and I would call it a song, was called Deep Dreaming. and it's a ballad. It sounds almost kind of like 1950s ballad kind of thing. It was definitely a little retro for what was going on in the New York scene at the time, but we would do it in the middle of the set. The backup singers would leave the stage, and I would do like an Eddie Cochran song, like Nervous Breakdown. And then I think we maybe played a second song. And then the third one, the girls would come back up on Deep Dreamin', because the only place I had the harmony was in the end. So they would start walking back on the stage. And when it got to that part, they would kick in with the harmonies. And it was a really nice way to do it and give them a little break and do something a little bit different in the middle of the set.
While still in high school, Regina was seen performing in coffee shops in the West Village and even scored gigs at clubs, much to her old-fashioned parents' dismay. At times, she would have to sneak out of her house just to get her music heard. Eventually, her songs had enough potential that a band was formed around her that blended her 60s influences with the emerging sound of new wave. Regina Richards and Red Hot.
I was like a teenager writing these songs that I didn't know what would happen with them, and somebody heard one of the songs and made a demo with me, like a little 4-track, and then all of a sudden things were starting to move and shake, and the band pulled together. I took that demo, and the guy who produced it said, I'm going to start looking for some musicians for you to play live gigs. And so we started getting it around there, and he met a drummer who knew a guitar player, who knew a bass player. It was that kind of thing. And all of a sudden there was a band just from this little demo. My first gig was at Max's Kansas City. It was on a Monday night. And Tommy Dean, who was the owner, Tommy was out of town, and his daughter was she would run the office when he wasn't there. And she said, yeah, Regina, I'm going to put you on a Monday because I have somebody I think will be interested in you. And it was Richard Goddard. So it was like this train just going. It happened. And that all came from me just writing in my little apartment. And it was just very exciting for it to keep going like that. It was my start. I really look back on those days as they were very special.
Armed with a growing reputation on New York clubs and a lineup that included Mike Osborne on drums, Nez Perce on guitar, Charlie Roth on bass, and a vocalist named Michelle, Regina Richards and Red Hot went into the recording studio in late 1980 to cut their debut self-titled album on A&M Records, produced by Richard Goddard.
Richard would bring us to the RCA studios that were up top of Radio City Music Hall with the old mics and everything. And I even went in the bathroom to get the acoustics one time with the mic. And it was really cool. He'd have the band playing and I'd be in an isolation booth singing so they could get a track. And then I would overdub guitar, my guitar. But we did it that way so that the band could hear me singing live. But what I didn't know was that Richard was recording my vocals in case, and that's why I was in isolation, in case that he got something he liked, we would keep it. We played the whole New York circuit, Max's, CB's, the Mud Club, everywhere that bands were playing. And then we went outside. Once we got signed, our booking agent was Premier Talent, and they booked a lot of bands that were already happening for years and stuff. So there I am, like this young person with a young band playing for the likes of, we did play with U2 a lot. We kind of did a tour with them for their first album. And that was a great experience because we loved them. But we also played with like Rick Derringer, the Winter Brothers, Edgar Winter and Johnny Winter. There were even other artists that we played with that were like very established blues or rock and roll on the radio. And we got to do that, which was great. And that was a great experience too.
Despite the very positive response the album had from critics and audiences alike, Regina Richards and Red Hot was never released in the US until 2021 and was only available in select countries like the UK and Japan. Regina and guitarist Nez Pierce would plug away writing new songs, perfecting their craft, and letting other musicians work in their studio located in a rehearsal facility near Times Square, known as the Music Building.
We didn't make a lot of money in those days, so a way of keeping your room in the Music Building was letting bands come and rehearse in there when we weren't rehearsing. And my guitar player started literally managing it as a place where people could come and set up and, work and just bring your snare drum and your own guitars. So we started doing that, and then he made this little area. We started recording bands. They would come to make their demos. So that was helping us keep the place for us to be able to rehearse as well. You'd get there, either we would take cabs because, it was 10th Avenue and 30-something Street, and it was a little sketch neighborhood. So we didn't want to be walking down the block with equipment and stuff, carrying our guitars and all. But you'd get out, and all of a sudden you'd hear all the windows were open because it was an old factory building, and the guy who owned it, he didn't do much of anything with it. He just let us use these rooms, and so you'd hear music coming out of 50 rooms in the building, and it was just echoing across the street. It was the coolest thing. It felt like going home to go there. And I think that's the way a lot of the bands felt. We all supported each other. We'd all come and see each other and, who had a gig where. And it was a really cool concept.
One of the musicians who turned up at Regina's studio was Detroit-born drummer Stephen Bray, who had just moved to the Big Apple, formed a band of his own called Breakfast Club, and was already in collaboration with two of his friends, bassist Glenn Burke and a then unknown singer named Madonna.
At some point we decided we should record some demos, and we knew that Regina and Nez and Charlie had a studio. Well, they had the ability to record in their loft. I think it was an 8-track recorder. Maybe it was even a 4-track. And so Madonna, Gary, and I think Brian Sims on guitar did some songs up in their loft. And so that process kind of, introduced us to them and certainly introduced me, and I bonded with Nez and Charlie on the recording side of things. And then I think at some point, Mike Osborne, who was playing drums for Red Hot, I think he moved out of town or something, but they needed a drummer, and I'm so happy that they asked me to play drums with them. And that's how things really got started.
Stephen was kind of doing 2 or 3 projects at once, and we were one of them for sure. And we started to write together too, kind of right after the band did what it did. But we did plenty of live gigs with him. As a matter of fact, what's funny is I used to put this black eyeliner on him, and I would do this little tiny beard thingy like Little Richard. I would do the 2 lines, and he loved it. He'd come up after a while. It was like, come on, you got to do my makeup, And all it was the Little Richard thing, and I'd give him a little liner. But we had a hoot. It was fun. People in the group would come and go, but he was kind of with us for a while there, until we kind of disbanded. And then I said, look, let's write. And he said, yeah, let's write. So he and I started doing some stuff.
Not only did we do lots of club gigs, we also played bar mitzvahs. I don't know if she told you that. You got to make money somehow. And these were lean times for a lot of us. And those bar mitzvah gigs came in very handy.
Though she was already an established rocker through Red Hot and was making connections with fellow musicians in New York, Regina was becoming discouraged about A&M Records' lack of support for her project. So she decided to disband the group and focus strictly on songwriting with Stephen as a frequent collaborator.
I have signed so many contracts in my life that after a while, it was just like paper. And then one person, and then it would go to the next contract and the next contract. And I think I was just getting exhausted by the business of it, and that enough wasn't being done to promote the group. We tried to get A&M to release us over here. And I forget what was going on at the time, but we should have been given a shot, I felt. But I think that was part of it. I think we were all really disappointed too, that things weren't progressing as strongly as we wanted them to. And so I kind of made a semi-conscious decision to just write and demo. The way I work best as a writer, if I'm collaborating, is if somebody has a track So Stephen would give me tracks that he finished. And of course, his tracks were great. So you get very energized to do it. And then I come in and I write the melody and all the lyrics, and we put it together. And that's how he and I work the best. But he also has come to me with things that were partially written, and some of them worked out. Some of them were a little tougher for me. If it's almost too confined, I don't know what to do with it.
If you and I are sitting in a room figuring out the chords and the melodies and the lyrics to a song, it's a more traditional process of writing a song. But because of my skill set, which does not include playing the piano particularly well, I needed to record things and then present it to a co-writer, to a collaborator. So I would work out chords, bass lines, some hooks and, melodic material, then present that to Regina or to Madonna or to Dan in Breakfast Club. And then we together finish it. I mean, they would sort of bring their lyric expertise to it. And then together we kind of polish things. So that was the workflow for Regina and I for sure.
In the case of Regina's hit, Baby Love, the song was born not by the usual back and forth between her and Stephen Bray, but by a cheeky challenge he drew on another music-building regular. Songwriter Mary Kessler had been lured into music initially by ways of LaBelle and Stevie Wonder. As the 80s continued to roll, she became part of bands that dabbled in a noise punk style, a world so far removed from Stephen's love of pop music.
She had a band called State of Desire. They were very, I would call it art rock. And I was, I've always been just a super pop fan, just love pop music. And we were having one of those discussions about art music versus pop music. And I said, well, it's not that easy. I think maybe I had the impression that she was suggesting pop music was throwaway music and easy to write, easy to produce. And I said, no, it's not that easy. And I said, I bet you can't write a pop song.
It was literally the first real pop song I ever wrote.
This is Mary Kessler.
And I went on to write quite a few others, but it was really fun to approach it with that kind of delightful and competitive attitude about the song. So I worked really with Stephen on it. And the first demo of the song, I'm not a singer at all. I'm a writer and a keyboard player, musician, and so on. But the first demo of the song is me singing it. And then Regina came in after that and made it a hit.
And I gave her the track to Baby Love, which was, still pretty fledgling. I think it was just drums and piano and bass probably. And she came back with a pretty cool, idea for the song. She had, I think the verse is the boy, there's no one home tonight. All that stuff was worked out. I thought, okay, this is really good. I don't remember how it got to Regina.
Stephen called me and said, hey, I've got this song. I want you to work on it. And I said, okay. Out of that came the demo, which of course, because Stephen did it, it sounded like a record because he's so incredibly talented. So that made people say, well, who's singing this? And the people that I was using for publishing said, well, it's Regina Richards. And they go, well, why doesn't she do it? And oh man, I fought it, I'm telling you. But I did, because I just wanted to publish and get songs out there, But they talked me into it, and it wasn't a bad thing that they did.
Stephen wanted to call it Baby Love from the very beginning. And he already had that as an idea for a chorus. So, of course, I asked the obvious question, which is, isn't that title taken? And he sort of set me straight on that. And so I was just going from the point of view of Baby Love. And it was extremely playful to just enjoy the lyrics. So I wrote the rest of the lyrics of the first and second verse and the chorus and so on, just with that in mind. And I grew up in a very, very small town and far away from anything much fun. So it's easy to imagine being on your own and thinking about what you would most love to happen. So it was super playful and delightful to work on. It was just very delightful all the way.
Again, Stephen Bray.
Baby Love was 100% produced and recorded and mixed all at my apartment in New York. We did the basic tracks. Paul Pesco came in and played guitar. The amazing David Sanborn came in to play saxophone on Sunday at 10 o'clock at night. He was supposed to show up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was really worried that it was going to be too loud because alto saxophones are crazy loud. And he showed up about 6 or 7 hours late, but it was worth it because, I love that saxophone solo that he plays. And then Michael Hutchinson, who was the mixing engineer, who I met through Jelly Bean and worked with quite a lot, may he rest in peace, while he was with us. He mixed it at my place, and I just loved the sound that he got on the tracks. He was, I think, if you were to look him up, I think he's probably the mixer on a lot of the records that have that 80s defining sound. But yeah, we did it top to bottom at my place, and I was really happy with the way it came out.
The work for Baby Love didn't stop there. Stephen called on Regina to write lyrics for the third verse of the song.
He wanted me to write another verse, and I didn't know that. When it's hard for me to write lyrics, it's usually because I'm not encouraged by something but he said, I need a third verse. I said, okay. And I wrote it literally in 2 minutes. It was one of those things. And I said, okay, here. But I had also written the chorus and rewrote parts of this and that. It came together like that, and it was great.
Regina was coming to the song. I mean, first of all, she wrote the last verse of the song and helped bring the song to where it needed to be, no question. She's just really good and really strong and also delightfully playful. And I think she was experienced and her energy was terrific. Maybe it was the peculiar blend of Stephen's sort of absolute pop instincts and the kind of oddness of my contribution may have given it a little zhuzh, because it wasn't coming straight from being a pop songwriter. For example, the time signature, I kind of made the timing uneven of the song at certain points. This weird kind of 5-7 bars or something. But I think Regina was just really good, a really great singer, a dedicated singer. I was a little embarrassed because it wasn't cool enough for me, in my electronic music explorations that I was doing. Then it started to be a hit and a hit and a hit. And I suddenly kind of realized that it was a very funny process for me because it kind of taught me a lot of important things. When I saw people enjoying it so much, when I saw the girls at the laundromat knowing every lyric of it, at the end of my street, I was like, oh, I get it. This is what you're meant to do, give pleasure to people and have fun and not just kind of, it was really nice for me, actually.
Surprisingly, this is not even the first version of the song that was released. In 1985, a whole year before Regina's version of Baby Love, a Dutch female trio by the name of the Star Sisters, known as the chorus vocalist behind the 80s oldies medley Stars on 45, was the first act to record and release the track under Danger LP. It was only relegated to B-side status.
They did it very early on, and I didn't know who they were or whatever, but somehow someone got the song to them. And then there was another actress, Phoebe Cates. She was working with Jelly Bean, and he wanted to cut it with her. And the legal thing is that I was recording it. I had a record deal, and because I was a writer on it, I had first right of refusal, I think they called it. In other words, if I said, yes, she can do it, go ahead, then it would have been okay. But because I wrote it and I was releasing it, that I could release it first. So he released his version the exact day after we released ours. But I was at a P1 in New York, and the DJ said to me, "Oh, did you know that this is coming out on the heels of yours?" He said, "Don't worry about it. You have nothing to worry about." That's all he said. And I figured, okay, if a guy from a DJ that I grew up with from PIX FM said that to me, it should be okay. But at that point, I wouldn't have cared anyway, because whoever made it a hit, I was a writer on it, and I would have been happy.
I actually like that version. I'm sorry they never released it, because I actually do like what they did. It has a sort of synth pop, even more synth pop. Because I was leaning more towards a synth soul. I never heard anybody say it that way, but a synth soul kind of approach to it. And so I was really happy to hear the Phoebe Cates version, because it was a little bit more synth pop, and it worked very well. And I'm sorry they didn't put it out.
Regina's original intention for Baby Love was to have someone record it instead of her. Many people have claimed Madonna was presented with the track during the sessions of her 1986 multi-platinum album, True Blue, which Stephen co-produced, but she declined. Unfortunately, based on the accounts of both Regina and Stephen, the mystery around whether the song was offered to Madonna or not still remains.
I'm not even positive that she was offered it. I don't remember that, but I've been hearing it recently. Maybe Stephen can set me straight on that, but I don't remember him saying, "I'm going to play this for her and see if she wants to cover it." I never heard him say that.
If it was, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't remember. I think I did hear Regina tell me that we had presented it to Madonna and she didn't want to do it. So maybe, I don't really know. It's certainly possible, because this was definitely a close-knit community of musicians and writers that were hanging around 8th Avenue at that point. So it is very possible. Madonna has a good ear for a song. So if she didn't want to do it, it must have been because she felt she had enough material for the album, or maybe it wasn't the direction she wanted to go at the time.
When Regina's version of Baby Love was finally released in the spring of 1986, reaching the top spot of Billboard's dance chart, the top 10 on pop, and the top 30 on R&B, music journalists were pretty quick in pointing out the similar tones that Regina and Madonna possessed. Some even went as far as claiming that Regina was nothing but a clone of the then Material Girl, which completely invalidated Richards' long career at the helm of Red Hot.
I was writing songs since I was 15. I got a band together. I played the circuit. I was known. I recorded. And so to have the comparison, I think a lot of that happened because it was Stephen and I involved in the song. Mary Kessler as well, but Mary did not produce Madonna. Stephen did. I think because of Stephen is why we had so many comparisons. I really do. The guy can't write a bad track, So it wasn't that I was mad about being compared to her. If the tracks sounded similar, the tracks would sound the way they sounded because Stephen is an artist, and that's how he, those are the sounds he created. So it was more that. Who wouldn't want to be compared to somebody who was very successful? But I came before her and had a little path going. And that's all I wanted people to know, is that I was not a knockoff kind of thing. I'm fine with it now. Back then, I was just like, well, I have a history, so I'm not going to worry about it.
Well, it's like in the Mafia, though, between me and Madonna. I promised her we would never talk about the comparisons. I promised her in 1986, I won't discuss the comparison between Lucky Star and Baby Love. I'm half kidding, because we did have a conversation about it. But, I personally don't think of it as anybody copying anybody. If you listen to the different groups that Gamble and Huff produced, they're the sort of common element between the different records that they made in terms of the way the sound of different artists have some commonality, because there's songwriters write in a particular style, producers produce in a particular style usually. So I don't think anybody's following on anybody's coattails. I feel like it's just the style of songwriting at that point in time.
Her music wasn't the only thing that caught people's imagination. Regina also had a distinctive image, encouraged by her management and record company. The architect of that wrapped ponytails look was her friend and makeup artist, Patrick Lucas, who had experience working with another 80s icon, Cyndi Lauper.
He said, I want to do something with you that sets you apart image-wise. And of course, the record company and everybody wanted that as well. I would have been fine the way I looked in the Red Hots with my rock and roll Joan Jett kind of hair, but they wanted something else. I wasn't opposed to it. I just didn't know how freaking bad it was going to hurt. After I'd like shoot a show and then I'd get in the limo and I go, help, please help me get it out. It was the most painful hairdo on earth, okay? And then we altered it a little at the end to be like he would just gather all of them up together, but then that would start hurting. It was just one of those things.
Regina's Curiosity album, which included Baby Love, yielded another single called Beat of Love, which peaked inside the top 40 on the dance charts. After 1988's Extraordinary Love, and a second album that was never released, it seemed that the once burning star had burned too soon. Regina says that at this time, she began to feel disillusioned about the different industry players she encountered on the way to the top.
I found it hard to deal with the big industry people. If your record was doing well, they were your best friend. And if you had a record out that wasn't doing so well, they kind of like ignored you. I don't do well with stuff like that. I would write from my heart and I'd say, well, 2 other people wanted to cover this song, major artists, and you guys turned them both down because you said I was going to release it as a single. So what are you going to do about it? So what they did was they just cut it as a single and didn't do anything. They were just checking off their boxes. And I was like, are you kidding me? I wrote that for Kenny Rogers. And then Alabama wanted to cover it. And they were putting out an album really quick. And they wanted it for that album. Atlantic said, oh, no, the artist is going to do it. That and the fact that they wanted the same thing. They didn't want to hear a song for what the song was. They wanted formula. They wanted 12 more of your single kind of thing.
Regina Richards took an extended break in her music career following the release of her 1990 song, Track You Down. In the meantime, she became a mother of 4 children. But after a long time away from the industry, Regina is itching to come back. She's looking forward to co-writing songs once more with Stephen, other former collaborators, and up-and-coming musicians. Plus, she's not saying no to potential live performances in the future. Stephen Bray continues to be involved in diverse and exciting musical projects. He was one of the executive music producers behind the acclaimed movie Respect, based on the life of the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, and is currently working on the film adaptation of the Tony-nominated musical The Color Purple. Bray has also reproduced material that was left unfinished from his former band, Breakfast Club, and has released them on streaming services. Mary Kessler, on the other hand, has long retired from the music industry since the early 90s and has applied her skills in technology to the social justice realm, launching one of the early large-scale crowdfunding platforms for girls' and women's rights called catapult.org. Her current focus is centered around human rights and climate issues. But what about Baby Love? Regina's soul #1 dance hit is still alive and kicking, especially in Ryan Murphy-produced TV shows like Scream Queens and Pose, bringing new audiences closer to the playful spirit of a catchy tune that in 2021 celebrated its 35th anniversary. Almost in unison, Mary Kessler, Stephen Bray, and Regina feel an enormous amount of pride for bringing feelings of joy and happiness to people through their work together. Because in the end, that's all that matters.
What an incredible honor. What a pleasure. It's really, really great to bring happiness and joy to people's lives. It's brilliant. And, what can I say? It's great. I'm thrilled that the song sort of still makes people happy. Those were great times, actually. In, New York was a place where tons of artists could afford to live, and be together and make stuff. And, you know, the energy in the music building was unbelievable. And it was really great to be part of it. And there was so many different strands kind of pouring into it. And I'm glad that one of the things that I worked on came out and does that and gives people sort of love and happiness. All right.
It's a cute song in that it's super simple and innocent. I also think the lyric is, thanks to Mary, it's very straightforward and believable. Like the situation is one that most people, if they're lucky, have found themselves in at some point as young people. And it's, you know, so songs like that remind you of something that you can kind of look at in your own life and say, oh, I remember exactly when I felt that way. Thanks to Regina singing, thanks to David Sanborn's saxophone playing, I think it's really heartfelt and emotionally soulful. And maybe that's why people still like it.
It did have some magic going on. It definitely did. And that's from Maestro Bray, too. I mean, that's a big part of the magic. But I think the song itself had some. And as every one of my songs, not everyone, but almost, has the word love in it. I used to get picked on for that. Baby love, sentimental love, love time, beat of love. The word love is in that song. And I hope that everything I do has some kind of love in it somehow, you know?
Thanks to Regina Richards, Stephen Bray, and Mary Kessler for their contributions to this episode. And massive shout outs to Ant and Ray for all of their help in making these interviews possible. And of course, thank you for listening. This episode was produced and hosted by yours truly, Diego Martinez. Our executive producer is Nicholas Nick Fresh Puzo, and our audio engineer is Adam Fogel. Follow CHOONS all over social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at CHOONSPod. That is CHOONSPOD. And become a part of our community on Patreon, where you can find early access to our content, after show discussions, and much more, starting at $5 per month. Go to patreon.com/CHOONSPod. Don't forget to rate us and give us a review on Apple Podcasts, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join us next time as we take a deep dive into an unsung classic on the next episode of CHOONS.